thing where people getting it wrong. Abdominal and core are different.
Right.
I essentially classify the core from the lat to the glute, inclusive of the lat.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because it's a system. It's a system that stabilizes the spine. That's the core.
All right. Okay. So let's talk lifting belts. Okay. And support. So when I first started, when you first started programming for me, and we did our assessment and stuff, I was wearing the standard 10 millimeter belt, and I was doing it all the way through my training as a safety precaution, right? Like it feels more secure. Your recommendation to me was to lose the belt during your training, so I can work on technique. So I know a lot of people who definitely won't deadlift without a belt. What are the reasons for training without, and when shouldn't you use one?
So yes, there's definitely an overuse or over reliance on lifting belts.
Yep.
You got to look at the reasons why we use it first.
Yep.
So the reasons why we'd use a belt is to increase the amount of stability and intra-abdominal pressure we have around the spine.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, a lot of the times that people aren't creating it in the first place. Okay, so we're not enhancing it, we become a reliance. Now, the belt itself is not very good at increasing stability around the spine. The core is. Okay, the core is what builds the stability, and our ability to increase intra-abdominal pressure, the mechanism of increasing intra-abdominal pressure through manipulation of our anatomy, spine, ribs, and pelvis mainly, and the contraction of the diaphragm to create compression in the abdominal cavity.
Yep.
So this, and then obviously once we contract the diaphragm, that increases intra-abdominal pressure. The secondary part is the stabilizing muscles around will then support the structure of the spine and the position, or the incomplete structure of spine, pelvis, and ribs, which then allows for optimal force transfer through the body.
Yep.
The belt then can act as something to enhance that performance. Now, people feel comfortable with it because it does increase pressure a bit and stability a bit. But they have never learnt the foundational techniques to create that stability or intra-abdominal pressure.
It becomes a crutch rather than something that accentuates the effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that needs to be mastered first to increase both performance, and if you have back pain, to reduce or to get rid of back pain in lifting. So putting more structure, more belt on won't help. There is times to use that. So in particular, if you do have a disc injury and you're having a hard time, like acute pain from injury, yes, a belt may be used to help maintain stability. Just throughout the day, not even training. Like training, if that's happening, we're not training optimally. We're training to try and increase core strength to look after our spine. So we're doing rehab. So that's when it's really bad. We can use it as a training tool to help increase intra-abdominal pressure. I tend to use. There's two ways I do it. So one is that I'll put a very small band, or put a band around that will fit tightly, just the bottom of their ribs. And because that puts a little bit of pressure on the diaphragm, so when they breathe, the band expands, because the diaphragm is then contracting and compressing the abdominal cavity. So that acts as a bit of a cue, because some people have a very hard time doing that.
So just to cut you off there, that's the cue I use. So I struggle maintaining that core pressure throughout a lift, especially in the bench. I feel like especially in the bench, I just lose all the pressure halfway through the lift. What I found is just having that feeling of a bit of resistance there, just so I can feel that I'm pushing my stomach out, maintaining the core pressure. That's all I need. I just need the kind of feeling.
Yeah. So some people can get good at compressing the diaphragm, but then lose it as soon as they start to move. So this is where various exercises. There's other exercises that help train that, but sometimes that skill doesn't carry over.
Yep.
So we can put a band around to also look at if it decreases through the lift. So they put all their mental focus on trying to maintain that pressure So sometimes they'll take a brace, but then they'll try to set up the squat or the bench press. As soon as they start to descend the bar, they lose it.
Yep.
So they put all the focus on maintaining that, and then almost kind of moving autonomously to that, because some people use it as a way of reactive momentum to it. Or so they'll have this whole sequence of taking a huge breath in, the diaphragm does its own thing, and then we lose it all. So it's like trying to build tension and then let the arms move, or let the legs move, whatever the movement is doing, whilst we're putting our focus on the diaphragm. We can also then try putting, so I've even used it with people to use a high belt. So they'll use a smaller belt that isn't very strong, and they put it above, set it around their ribs, and that can help with focusing. So that takes away from trying to create stability around the core and just puts the emphasis on the diaphragm.
Yeah.
So using up a high belt, and I found that it has increased people's performance as well. So in terms of more as a cue, and those type of training modalities will be better for lifting, because you can try and cue it outside of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll carry over.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work within the system. So the squat, everything we learn has to be integrated into that pattern, because the brain is only going to tell the body to, when you say squat, it has a sequence between 1 and 10 that it's going to fire exactly. Unless we use a cue to change one of those patterns within, say, like sequence number, say 7, we need to add something or change something, change a line in that code so that we can have a different outcome. Otherwise, the mind is going to play it like a tape recording over and over again, unless we consciously change that. So we may learn all the breathing techniques outside of training, but unless we focus on trying to change that line of code with various cues or training implements that force positions or particular angles or joint angles or whatever it is that we're trying to do to change that line of code, so that within that system of the squat pattern, then we can finally learn how to do it properly.
So when with your best athletes, when are they ever training with a belt, or are they just competing?
Yeah, all the
with a belt?
time. Yeah, all the time. But they learn to use the belt up until a certain time. So I'll put the belt on up to a certain weight. Let's say 75% or something.
Yeah. So when they're starting to do heavy triples and things like that, the belt comes on.
Yeah, and they'll use it more and more, especially in more equipment and all that stuff, and coming into competition. And off season as well. People need to stay in the stimulus of lifting competition style to keep getting stronger. Whether the changes in volume will be different, but essentially they should be using all the equipment that they can to simulate the performance method they're doing. When I say everything's in a system, that is more narrow, more specified for elite lifters.
Yeah.
So lifting without a belt will only carry over to some degree to maximal lifting. Essentially you have to learn to lift with all the equipment.
Yes.
If the foundational skills aren't there, then you should remove the belt, learn to use without it. Advanced lifters, and it happens all the time, they get too reliant on it. If we have time, we'll pull the belt out for a while and try and increase their strength without the belt, especially if we're trying to build lower back resilience. So they have had back injuries. My goal is also to try and increase resilience. Can we lift more weight without a belt? Can we do more without a belt? Can we move in more directions, do more movement without the belt? And essentially the carryover effect from that is better spine stability. Doesn't necessarily mean has a direct carryover to the squat pattern, but the elements that we're trying to achieve in terms of trying to have a strong core to manage lower back resilience will carry over to the squat very well, because we should be able to do more volume without pain more frequently.
Do you think then that foundational training without the belt to improve that core stability and things like that, does that mean that people who have that foundation are less likely to experience back pain generally in life around the training, versus people who, even though they could both lift the same weight, one is utterly reliant on a belt versus somebody who has the right abdominal?
Yes. So yes and no. I think a lot of the people, I'm talking from experience here, a lot of the people who end up learning how to use their core really to the absolute efficiency, highest level of efficiency, have had a back injury.
Yeah.
or they've had some sort of back pain, which then cues them and forces them to actually learn and adapt more.
There's a reason for them to.
It's like learning from a mistake.
Yeah.
They do get taught how to do it or do it properly, and from time to time we will check it. Things happen, injury happen, things get lazy, things get missed, and a lot of the times they don't learn the importance of it until it's near the end.
Well, I mean, for some reason, and we'll go back. We're going back to what we said before about bodybuilding tends to be, for the general person, the dominant kind of entryway into lifting.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like abdominal work is seen as an aesthetic thing that you do at the end of a session. And
this is where another thing where people getting it wrong. Abdominal and core are different.
Right.
I essentially classify the core from the lat to the glute, inclusive of the lat.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Because it's a system. It's a system that stabilizes the spine. That's the core. And allows us to maximize force transfer, right, from the legs to the upper body or to the bar. And vice versa, from the bench press through the body, through to the floor, back up. So the ground reaction forces. So we've got, again, we're looking at force transfer here. But yes, essentially, a lot of the things that bodybuilding does, I think, is secondary to what should be learnt first.
Yes. Yeah.
And if someone's goal is that, I think we still need, performance and physique are built on pillars of health and good function. Now, a lot of the times, both of them are overlooked all the time, but functional movement is overlooked. Can we squat? Can we hinge? And those essentially are the foundations of being able to move properly, and then being able to move properly will increase the amount of work we can do out of injury and utilize the exercise to better efficiently target muscle groups if we're going into the bodybuilding realm. So I think the foundations of trying to build muscle in terms of in a bodybuilding sense should be built on a foundation of quality movement.
Yes.
First, as well as quality health, because you got to look at training for something specific as a stress, but we have to have the foundations of our health to handle that stress, so that we can, grow and recover.
Awesome.
Again, that's gone. Again, now we said, like you said, let's try and find something that's less philosophical, but yeah, we put the belt under a philosophy of ideology of behind why people do it, and essentially, it's lacking the foundations.
Yeah, and like anything, it's always better to spend the time to learn it, do it properly, rather than cutting corners and in the long term being reliant on that. Yeah.
But no one ever learns from mistakes without making mistakes. So
True. Yeah.
There's rarely ever a time. A few people do come straight to me, but without and doing everything properly. Essentially, is everyone's before they come to me, they've been through things. They've can't figure out they can't get any better. Somewhere else there's something missing. Then that's when we're generally pulling everything back. But that's normal. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So that's just, again, we're looking at the philosophy of coaching, is that we do understand the foundations that to build performance and build a physique, and it is our job to get people to move like that, to move better and be healthier, so that they can then essentially achieve their goals. That's I guess that's what the coach's understanding
Yes.
should be. So
Cool.
all right,
Done.